The rattle hit the hardwood floor with a sharp clack, but Grace didn't move. She stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, the other clenched tightly around a baby spoon. In the nursery just a few feet away, her daughter Lily's tiny body had gone completely stiff in her high-backed therapy chair, her face flushed and motionless. Then came the sound no mother ever wants to hear, a choking gasp, wet and panicked, followed by silence. "Lily?" Grace's voice cracked as she rushed across the room, heart slamming against her ribs. She barely noticed the golden blur darting past her ankles. The puppy had seen it first. Hope you enjoyed this story. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear where you're watching from. Now, let's continue with the story. The spoon clattered from Grace's hand as she dropped to her knees beside Lily, instinct kicking in. 6 months of daily care had trained her hands well. Her heart, however, was another story. It still fractured each time her baby struggled. Lily's lips trembled, her chest barely rising. The teething ring lay on the floor in 2 pieces, one jagged end slick with saliva. The other piece, smaller, rounder, was missing. But Grace wasn't alone. Before she could move into action, Charlie, the golden retriever, puppy they'd only just met a few days ago, had already leapt onto the padded bench and wedged his small body beside Lily's stiff form. His nose pressed urgently against her cheek, then down to her mouth. That's when Grace saw it. A glimpse of white plastic lodged near Lily's tongue. Her body moved without thought. She turned Lily, 2 fingers sweeping her mouth, then shifted to the infant Heimlich. 1, 2 compressions, tiny gags, another desperate press. Then, pop! The piece flew out, bouncing once on the floor before rolling under the dresser. Lily let out a piercing wail. It was the sweetest sound Grace had ever heard. She collapsed backward onto the floor, gasping. Charlie rested his head gently on Grace's lap, eyes locked on Lily. He hadn't barked. He hadn't panicked. He'd just known. 2 hours later, Grace sat on the front porch of their small Asheville home, wrapped in an old knitted shawl, Lily asleep in her arms. The air was thick with the scent of wet leaves and pine, the early evening chill wrapping itself around her like a warning. Inside, Charlie dozed near the fireplace, tail flicking slightly in his sleep. She couldn't stop replaying the moment, the speed, the certainty, and the sheer impossibility. The puppy had reacted faster than she had. Not by chance, not by training, something else. Instinct, number, something deeper. Something she couldn't name. When Ben pulled up in the driveway a little after 7, his work boots thudded on the gravel like tired punctuation marks. He climbed the porch steps slower than usual, glancing down at them with soft, exhausted eyes. He looked older than his 32 years. "Hey," he said, voice low. Grace nodded toward Lily. She almost choked. He blinked. "What?" The teething ring broke. Piece got stuck. I didn't see it right away. She paused. Charlie did. Ben didn't answer, just stared at the baby, then at the closed front door behind her. Grace added quietly, "He warned me." No barking, no chaos, just urgency. Ben sat beside her on the old wooden swing that creaked under his weight. The same swing they'd rocked on the day they brought Lily home from the NICU, when they'd thought things were finally looking up. "I didn't think a dog could," he started. "I know." They sat in silence, broken only by the rustling of wind through bare branches and the occasional creak of the swing. After a moment, Grace asked, "Do you think we made a mistake?" He looked at her. "Taking Charlie?" She nodded. Ben shook his head. I think he's the best decision we didn't know we were making." Grace let out a soft laugh, surprised by the sudden release in her chest. For weeks, every day had felt like a held breath. That afternoon, something shifted, and it had started with a puppy. 2 days earlier, it had been Rosa's idea. Their neighbor from across the street, Rosa Martinez, had knocked on the door with a determined smile and a puppy tucked in her coat like a precious loaf of bread. "He's the runt," she'd said, stepping inside without waiting. "Smallest of the litter, but he's gentle, different." Grace had resisted at first. They had enough going on. Lily's therapy, the mounting bills, the nights filled with soft weeping and stiff limbs. Another creature to feed, clean, worry about. But then the puppy had trotted over to Lily's therapy mat. He hadn't barked or jumped. He'd simply laid his head gently on Lily's arm. And Lily had smiled. The first real smile since her diagnosis. Now, sitting on the porch, Grace looked down at her sleeping daughter and whispered, "What are you?" "Charlie." Inside, the puppy stirred, as if he'd heard her. Tomorrow, they would call Dr. Harper. They'd tell her what happened, how Lily had moved, how she'd responded, how Charlie had stepped in before either parent could. They'd ask questions, maybe even look for answers. But for tonight, Grace would hold Lily close, listen to the wind sweep through the Carolina pines, and wonder about the little golden dog sleeping by the fire. The late autumn air was brisk when Rosa Martinez returned to the Whitmans' doorstep. Her coat was bundled tightly around her small frame, and in her arms, Charlie nestled like he belonged there. Again. Grace opened the door with a half smile, one hand still gripping the baby monitor. Lily had finally drifted off for her afternoon nap. After the choking scare 2 days ago, every soft breath the monitor transmitted felt like borrowed time. "I didn't want to intrude," Rosa said softly, her eyes twinkling with something that looked like more than just neighborly concern. "But I brought Charlie's blanket. It smells like his litter mates. Might help him settle better." Grace gestured her in without a word, and Rosa stepped into the house like she'd done it 1,000 times. Charlie squirmed slightly, then wriggled free from her grasp and trotted toward the nursery, tail swishing in lazy arcs. He paused at the threshold of Lily's room, peering inside, then turned back and lay down just outside the door like a self-assigned sentry. "You saw it, didn't you?" Grace asked after a long silence. She poured 2 cups of coffee, the sound filling the quiet space between them. Rosa nodded, settling into the kitchen chair. "I've raised over 40 dogs, Grace. I've seen loyalty, patience, even empathy. But what Charlie did..." She shook her head. "That wasn't instinct. That was choice." Grace gripped her mug tighter. "He's only been here a few days." "And yet Lily already trusts him more than most people," Rosa said, stirring her coffee with slow, deliberate movements. "Animals know, especially the ones with purpose." "Purpose?" Grace echoed. Rosa's eyes softened. "Some dogs are born to be protectors. Some are comforters. Charlie, he's something else. He sees things, feels things, maybe even more than we do." Grace let that sit in the air. She didn't believe in magic, but she wasn't sure she could call what had happened with Charlie anything else. She had trained as a pediatric nurse, seen thousands of cases, measured thousands of milestones with cold clinical tools. But nothing had prepared her for this. They sat in silence, drinking coffee, as the monitor gently pulsed with Lily's steady breathing. Later that afternoon, when Lily awoke, Charlie padded into the room without waiting for permission. Grace followed, watching from the doorway, as the puppy gently sniffed Lily's feet, then nudged a soft yellow elephant plushie toward her. Lily stared at him, face passive for a moment, then giggled. A high, soft sound that made Grace's breath catch. "She hasn't done that in weeks," she whispered. Charlie pressed his paw near Lily's arm, waiting. When she didn't move, he circled around and tried again, this time placing the plushie closer to her hand. Grace didn't interfere. She just watched, heart pounding. Then it happened, a flicker. Lily's fingers twitched, then twitched again. Her wrist jerked slightly, as if reaching, tentative, disconnected, but unmistakably intentional. Grace dropped to her knees. "Do it again, baby," she whispered. Charlie didn't wag, didn't bark. He just sat beside her, watching Lily with calm encouragement, like a therapist with infinite patience. This time Lily's hand made it halfway to the plushie. Grace could barely contain herself. She grabbed her phone and started filming. That night, after Ben came home and heard the story, twice, He sat in stunned silence on the couch while Lily slept in his arms, and Charlie rested at his feet. "You think it's real?" he finally asked. Grace nodded. "It wasn't a spasm. I've seen those. This was different." Ben looked at Charlie. The puppy looked back, eyes serious, thoughtful. "Doctor, Harper needs to see this," Grace said. Ben hesitated. "You sure we're ready for that? If we bring in the doctors, this stops being ours." "She's not a science project," Grace agreed. "But if he's helping her heal, if there's even a chance he's unlocking something." Ben nodded. "Then we owe it to her to understand it." Charlie shifted slightly, placing one paw on Ben's boot. He didn't move it. Dr. Harper arrived 2 days later, walking through the front door with the same weary caution she always carried when she entered a house where something miraculous might or might not be happening. Grace greeted her with cautious optimism. They watched the video together first, then the second, then the third. Dr. Harper leaned forward, slowing the playback, frame by frame, as Lily's fingers jerked toward the plushie. "This is purposeful," she murmured. "There's no spastic recoil. She's tracking." Grace sat very still. "She's reacting to Charlie." Dr. Harper nodded, but her brow furrowed. "He's triggering something. Her visual attention sharpens. There's increased motor planning." "Is that even possible?" Ben asked from the kitchen. Dr. Harper leaned back. "There's research on animal-assisted therapy, mostly in older children or adults. But this is different. This dog is behaving like he knows her needs before she does." Charlie entered the room just then and walked directly to Lily, who was resting in her chair. He pressed his head gently against her leg. "I'd like to observe this in person," Dr. Harper said. The next hour unfolded like a stage play. Charlie retrieved the plushie again, nudged it near Lily. When she made no move, he paused, sat, and then gently tapped her wrist with his paw. Lily's hand twitched. He repeated the process twice, each time watching her face, adjusting his approach. Dr. Harper didn't speak for several minutes after. Finally, she said, "I've seen therapy dogs respond to distress, to seizures, even to blood sugar levels. But I've never seen one initiate a therapeutic process unprompted. He's replicating the core concepts of physical therapy, engagement, repetition, reward, without any formal training." Grace felt her pulse rise. "So what do we do?" "I want to bring in the hospital's PT team. Film this. Measure her responses neurologically. Grace, this could change the way we understand infant neuroplasticity." Ben stood. "Wait, we're not turning our daughter into an experiment." Dr. Harper held up her hand. "I get it. I do. But what's happening here is extraordinary. If we can learn from it, we might help other children like Lily. With your permission, I'll handle everything gently, carefully, on your terms." Grace looked down at Charlie, who was now curled beside Lily, fast asleep. Lily's fingers rested lightly on his fur. "She hasn't slept like this in weeks," she said. Ben gave a slow nod. "Then let's start small. No labs, no machines, just observe." Dr. Harper agreed. Over the next week, Dr. Harper visited the house 3 more times. Each time she brought one new expert, a physical therapist, a behavioral analyst, and finally a pediatric neurologist. Each one left speechless. They observed patterns. How Charlie approached Lily slowly, made eye contact, then placed a toy or physical cue near her. How Lily tracked him with increased engagement. How her hand reflexes grew stronger, smoother. They recorded everything. One morning, Grace opened her inbox to find a message from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. Dr. Harper had quietly shared the videos and initial notes. "We would be honored to invite the Whitman family and Charlie to join a groundbreaking pilot study in pediatric animal-assisted rehabilitation." Grace stared at the screen for a long time. Ben came in carrying groceries. "What is it?" She turned the laptop toward him. "They want us in Philly." He scanned the message. 6 months? Grace nodded. We can't just leave everything. What about work? What about Rosa? What if it disrupts Lily's progress? Grace exhaled. What if it moves her forward? Charlie padded in from the living room and sat between them. He looked at Grace, then Ben, and let out a low, quiet sound, almost like he was waiting. Ben crouched down beside him, scratching behind his ears. I think he already knows we're going, he said. Grace didn't answer, but something in her chest, something heavy she'd been carrying since the diagnosis, lifted just a little. She looked down the hallway toward Lily's room where the monitor glowed faintly. She thought about Rosa, about Asheville, about the porch swing and autumn leaves, and she thought about what Rosa had said. Some dogs are born with purpose. Maybe Charlie's was only just beginning. Grace didn't sleep that night. Even though Lily had drifted off peacefully with her hand curled around Charlie's fur, Grace lay awake, listening to the baby monitor's soft hum and the distant sounds of Asheville's quiet streets. Her mind replayed every moment of the day, Charlie's gentle nudging, Lily's tiny twitching fingers, the way Dr. Harper's eyes had widened with quiet awe. Something was happening, something big, and it terrified her as much as it gave her hope. By morning, the unease hadn't lifted. She stood in the kitchen nursing her coffee while Ben packed his lunch for work, his movements quiet but tired. He didn't say much, and neither did she. There was too much swirling between them to be put into words. That afternoon, Grace sat cross-legged on the floor beside Lily's therapy mat, watching, as Charlie once again positioned himself beside the baby. The plush yellow elephant had become a regular prop in their little drama. Charlie nudged it forward, slowly, then looked at Lily, waiting. Lily's eyes followed the toy, and her lips moved soundlessly. Grace held her breath. Charlie gently tapped Lily's wrist with his paw, then nudged the toy even closer. This time Lily's hand twitched not once, but twice, and her fingers briefly curled. Grace gasped, then covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes. Charlie glanced up at her, head tilted, then laid down beside Lily, letting her hand rest on his fur. It was real. It was repeatable. And it was only growing. Later that week, Rosa came by unannounced with a thick manila folder and a warm casserole dish. For energy, she said, placing the food on the counter. You'll need it. She handed the folder to Grace, who opened it to find brochures, articles, and research papers on animal-assisted therapy. I've been reading, Rosa said, settling into the kitchen chair. What Charlie's doing. It's beyond anything I've seen. But there's precedent. A few stories, some research from Europe. Mostly anecdotal, but enough to make people listen. Grace sifted through the papers slowly. You think we should go to Philadelphia? Rosa didn't answer immediately. She looked down at her hands, fingers wrinkled and strong from years of caring for animals. I think, she said finally, that the world needs to see what that dog is doing. Not for the headlines, not for fame, but because it could change lives. Ben was quiet when Grace brought it up that night. He sat on the edge of the bed, staring down at his work boots. I can take a leave, he said slowly. It'll hurt, but we'll figure it out. I can call in a few favors, talk to my brother about the mortgage. He looked up at her. But we don't do this unless we're sure. Not kind of sure. Not maybe. Are you sure? Grace thought of Lily's hand twitching again, of her eyes lighting up when Charlie entered the room, of the way she slept longer, calmer, with him beside her. I'm sure. Preparations began the next day. Dr. Harper arranged everything with the hospital, coordinating a temporary apartment for the family near the pediatric wing. Charlie would be allowed in all sessions and would undergo evaluations as part of the program. The hospital even arranged pet-friendly accommodations, understanding that Charlie wasn't just a pet, he was part of the therapy. Ben filed paperwork at work, and Rosa volunteered to stay behind and check on the house, the mail, the yard. Go, she told them, and don't look back. The night before they left, Grace sat on the porch swing with Lily in her lap and Charlie at her feet. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the smell of pine and smoke from distant chimneys. You ready, Charlie? She whispered. The puppy didn't move, but his tail thumped once against the porch. She kissed Lily's head, closed her eyes, and let the stillness settle in her bones. Their trip began before sunrise. Ben loaded the car with quiet efficiency while Grace bundled Lily in layers of soft blankets. Charlie leapt into the back seat without hesitation, curling beside Lily's car seat like he belonged there. The highway stretched out before them like a ribbon of unknowns. Grace glanced back at Charlie and Lily, both asleep before they reached the city limits. Ben reached over and took her hand. No words were needed. Philadelphia greeted them with cold wind and gray skies. The apartment was small but warm, the hospital clean and modern, and the staff welcoming but observant. Everything was in place. The next morning they met with Dr. Patel, the lead therapist assigned to Lily's case, along with 2 researchers and a neurologist. Charlie stayed close to Lily, watching everyone with alert, cautious eyes. Let's start simple, Doctor, Patel said, setting up Lily's mat with a few toys, including the now iconic yellow elephant. Charlie waited for Grace's nod before moving. He approached Lily slowly as always and nudged the toy toward her. The room fell silent. Lily's eyes tracked the toy, then Charlie, then back. Her fingers moved, again and again. By the 4th attempt, she brushed the toy's edge. Dr. Patel's voice broke the silence. Did you train him? No, Grace whispered. He just knows. For the next hour, the room was filled with soft instructions, camera clicks, note-taking, and emotional restraint. Grace kept her hands clasped tightly together to avoid crying. Ben stood against the wall, watching every motion. Charlie performed like he always had, calm, attentive, never distracted. Lily responded more with each passing minute. After the session, Doctor, Patel approached them. I've seen therapy dogs work wonders, but I've never seen one lead the process. We have a lot to learn, from both of them. That night, in their temporary apartment, Grace sat beside the small crib they'd borrowed from the hospital's Family Resource Center. Charlie lay under the crib, not moving. Lily's hand draped over the side, resting on his back. Ben came in from the kitchenette with 2 mugs of tea. So, this is real, he said. Grace nodded. It's real. He handed her the mug and sat beside her. Then let's see where it goes. The first week in Philadelphia felt like learning how to breathe in a new rhythm. Everything was familiar, but not quite. The hospital halls had the same sterile scent Grace remembered from her nursing days, but now they felt colder, like they belonged to someone else's life. Lily, surprisingly, adjusted faster than either of her parents. Her sleep was lighter, but she didn't fuss as much as Grace feared. She seemed alert, curious, especially whenever Charlie was nearby. Charlie, on the other hand, acted like he'd been born for this. Every morning, as soon as Grace clipped on his leash, he would trot confidently down the apartment hallway, ears perked, as if ready to clock in for his shift. He waited calmly through the elevator ride, sat patiently outside the therapy room until invited in, and always approached Lily like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Their second therapy session was more structured. Dr. Patel had prepared a new routine to test Charlie's interactions with Lily. Cameras were placed in 3 corners of the room, recording from different angles. Grace and Ben sat behind a one-way mirror with a behavioral analyst, watching in real time. Charlie entered first, sniffing the air, giving a quick glance toward the hidden window, then walked straight to Lily. She lay on her padded mat with a series of colored blocks arranged around her. Dr. Patel sat off to the side, silent, observing. Charlie looked at Lily, then at the red block closest to her right hand. He gently nudged it, then waited. Lily's eyes flicked to the block. Her right hand twitched. Charlie repositioned the block just a few inches closer, then nudged Lily's wrist softly with his nose. Her fingers curled. Then, in a movement that seemed almost too fluid to be real, Lily brushed her fingers across the top of the block. From behind the glass, Grace pressed her hands to her mouth. Did you see that? Dr. Harper, standing next to her, didn't speak. Her eyes were locked on the screen, her jaw tight with concentration. Charlie sat back watching Lily as she stared at the block, then looked at him. He tilted his head, gave a soft chuff, and lowered his body into a lying position, front paws outstretched, tail wagging slowly. It was encouragement without pressure. The behavioral analyst leaned forward. "That's not random. He's waiting for her to initiate the next step." As if on cue, Lily's arm jerked forward again, stronger this time until her palm rested fully on the block. Her lips parted slightly in what could only be described as effort. Grace whispered, "She's trying." Charlie licked her hand once, then let her rest it on his paw. Later that day, back in the apartment, Ben sat on the worn couch, scrolling through emails from work while Grace rocked Lily in her arms. Charlie lay on the floor beside them, eyes half closed, tail thudding once in a while against the rug. "They want to send a team from Johns Hopkins to observe," Ben said quietly. Grace didn't respond right away. She stared out the window at the concrete courtyard below. "It's starting, isn't it?" "What is?" "All of it. The media. The attention. People calling it a miracle." Ben looked at her. "Isn't it?" Grace shook her head. "Number. It's work. It's patience. It's a little girl fighting her own body every minute of the day. It's a puppy who somehow knows what she needs. But miracle, number. That makes it sound like it just happened." Ben set the phone down. "So, what do we call it?" Grace looked at Lily, now drifting to sleep in her arms, and at Charlie, who hadn't left Lily's side for more than a few minutes since they'd arrived. "We call it what it is, a connection." The following day, the hospital requested permission to begin brain imaging. Nothing invasive, just passive EEG monitoring during Lily's sessions with Charlie. Grace hesitated. She didn't want Lily to become a specimen, poked and studied. But Dr. Patel assured her that the process would be gentle, the monitoring equipment no more intrusive than a soft headband. "Her comfort comes first," Dr. Patel said. "Always." The first session with the EEG cap was surprisingly smooth. Charlie didn't seem fazed by the extra gear on Lily's head. If anything, he adjusted his behavior, going slower, watching her more closely. The results were immediate and astonishing. Baseline readings showed minimal activity in certain motor cortex areas. But during interaction with Charlie, particularly when he initiated physical contact, Lily's neural activity spiked, not randomly, in focused patterns. "Her brain is waking up," the neurologist said, reviewing the printouts with wide eyes. "He's lighting her up." By the end of the second week, the term "the Charlie effect" had started circulating among the hospital staff. One afternoon, while Lily napped and Ben stepped out for groceries, Grace found herself alone in the quiet apartment. Charlie sat across the room, watching her with those familiar, too wise eyes. She knelt down beside him, running her hand over his soft ears. "You know you've started something, don't you?" Charlie tilted his head, then placed one paw over her knee. Grace swallowed hard. "They want to talk to us about a research protocol, a full study. They want to make this into something repeatable." She didn't say the rest out loud, that she was scared. That part of her worried what would happen when the magic, no, the connection, was turned into data, graphs, reports. That Lily's story might be overshadowed by Charlie's fame. That what made this whole thing real would get lost in all the attention. Charlie leaned forward and licked her hand gently. Then he walked to Lily's crib, curled beside it, and closed his eyes. That night they had their first video call with Rosa. Her face lit up the screen, framed by the warm yellow glow of the Asheville kitchen. She smiled at the sight of Lily sleeping peacefully, and Charlie resting beside her. "You look tired," Rosa said. Grace laughed softly. "We are, but it's a good kind of tired. You've come far." "We're just getting started," Grace said. Rosa leaned closer to the camera. "I have a thought. When you come home, we start something bigger than just Lily. We train more Charlies, build something lasting. Grace's heart caught in her throat. You think others could do what he does? Rosa nodded. Not every dog, but some. With the right eyes, the right heart. Yes. And I know how to find them. Charlie lifted his head at that moment, ears twitching as if he understood. As the call ended and the apartment dimmed into sleep, Grace sat in the quiet with Lily's soft breathing and Charlie's steady presence beside her. The world outside might be watching, asking questions, preparing for interviews and research protocols. But in this moment, in this tiny apartment far from home, everything that mattered was already right here. Charlie, Lily, and the invisible thread between them that no science could fully explain. By the start of their third week in Philadelphia, the Whitmans had settled into a rhythm that felt, if not normal, then at least sustainable. Mornings began with Lily's therapy prep, soft stretching exercises on her mat, while Charlie lay quietly beside her. Ben would brew strong coffee while Grace dressed Lily in something cozy and colorful, often with matching socks and headbands, tiny flourishes that helped her feel like more than just a patient. The walk to the hospital was brisk but comforting. The city's noise was less jarring now. Grace had even found a shortcut through a quiet courtyard lined with benches and iron lampposts, where she sometimes paused with Lily bundled in the stroller and Charlie walking steadily at her side, leash loose but unnecessary. By the time they reached the hospital's pediatric therapy wing, Charlie knew exactly where to go. He'd trot down the hallway, pause at the check-in counter to greet the receptionist with a soft tail wag, then settle beside the therapy room door without a sound. Dr. Patel greeted them that Monday with a new glint in her eyes. We're expanding today, she said. I'd like to test Charlie's influence during a shared session with another patient. Grace felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't expected to share the space, not yet. With who? She asked. Dr. Patel glanced down the hallway. Ethan, 7 years old, spinal cord injury from a car crash. He's been unresponsive in therapy for months, withdrawn, shut down emotionally. But he saw one of Lily's sessions through the observation window. His mother said he hasn't stopped asking about the puppy since. Grace looked at Ben, who was just arriving with Lily in his arms. Charlie, hearing Ethan's name, perked up slightly, as if already attuned. Grace hesitated. What if it overwhelms Lily? Dr. Patel softened her tone. We'll be careful. Low stimulation environment. No pressure. Just see what happens. The shared session was set for late morning. When the time came, Grace entered the therapy room first with Lily and Charlie. The lighting was soft, the toys familiar. A large therapy mat stretched across the center of the room. On the opposite side, the door opened again. In rolled Ethan. He was small for 7, with thin arms and legs tucked neatly under a navy blue blanket in his wheelchair. His mother, Carla, followed closely behind, her expression tense and guarded. Ethan didn't look at the adults. He looked at Charlie, and Charlie, astonishingly, got up from Lily's side, walked halfway across the mat, and sat down in front of Ethan. No wagging, no barking, just quiet presence. Ethan stared back at him, then slowly reached out. Charlie leaned forward and gently rested his head in Ethan's lap. Grace watched Lily carefully. There was no jealousy, no distress. Instead, Lily turned her head and smiled. Dr. Patel observed everything from the edge of the room, scribbling notes furiously. What happened over the next 15 minutes wasn't dramatic. It wasn't viral video worthy, but it was real. Charlie moved between both children slowly, intuitively. He would nudge Lily's favorite toy toward her, then bring a similar one to Ethan. He'd rest near Lily when she grew tired, then gently bump Ethan's hand with his nose when the boy retreated into silence. And when Ethan finally quietly said, "Hi, Charlie," it was the first word he'd spoken in front of a therapist in weeks. Grace glanced at Carla, who had a hand over her mouth, eyes shining. That afternoon, Dr. Patel met with both families. What we're witnessing is rare. Cross-patient stimulation. Peer-mirrored responses. It's beyond what we planned. But I believe this is a turning point for both children. Carla, usually quiet and reserved, spoke up. Ethan's been frozen since the accident. He talks to me, sometimes. But with Charlie, it's like something's unlocking. Ben shifted in his seat. That's what it felt like with Lily. Like he was unlocking a door we didn't know was closed. Dr. Patel nodded slowly. We've seen dogs trigger responses in individual patients. But this kind of shared therapeutic environment, it's something else. For the next few days, Charlie worked with both children together. Lily's arm movements grew smoother, more deliberate. She began to anticipate Charlie's motions, even reaching toward him before he placed a toy near her. Ethan, too, began responding, not just with his hands, but with his words. He started asking Charlie questions. Do you like red or blue? Where's your sister? Can Lily hear me? Questions with no expectation of answers, but questions nonetheless. Grace and Carla often exchanged glances during the sessions, somewhere between disbelief and hope. On the fourth day of shared therapy, Carla brought up something new. Ethan saw Charlie with Lily and asked if he could have a dog like him someday. Grace smiled gently. Charlie's sister, Luna, still lives with Rosa, our neighbor. She has the same temperament. She's not trained, but she has the heart. Carla's eyes lit up. Would Rosa be open to that? Grace texted Rosa that night. Her reply came 5 minutes later. If he's anything like Lily, Luna will know what to do. The next morning, Grace showed Carla the message. Rosa's willing to bring Luna here, for a trial visit. Carla covered her mouth, shaking slightly. He hasn't asked for anything since the accident. Not toys, not outings, but this he wants. 3 days later, Rosa arrived in Philadelphia with Luna in tow. The reunion between the two puppies was gentle but unmistakably joyful. Luna, though slightly smaller than Charlie, had the same calm energy, the same intuitive gaze. Ethan met her in the courtyard just outside the therapy center. When Luna approached his chair and laid her head in his lap, he laughed, a clear, uninhibited sound that made everyone watching freeze. She's soft, he said. She smells like Charlie. Over the next hour, Luna mirrored many of Charlie's techniques. She would nudge Ethan's hand, wait for a response, then try again. Within minutes, Ethan began moving his fingers, gripping a soft ball for the first time in months. Inside the therapy wing, Dr. Harper watched the footage with a deep frown of concentration. This is no longer anecdotal, she said to her colleague. We're witnessing coordinated emotional and motor response from 2 children with 2 dogs, untrained, untaught, just connected. The hospital's research board called for an urgent meeting. The team now had enough data to support expanding the program, not just with Lily and Charlie, but with Ethan and Luna too. That night, Grace stood by Lily's crib in the apartment. Charlie lay nearby, half asleep but alert. Across town, in a borrowed hospital guest room, Carla tucked Ethan in with Luna curled at his feet. A new rhythm had begun. 2 children, 2 puppies, and a bridge between them that no science had created, but all science would soon try to understand. The next morning, Dr. Patel met with Grace and Ben privately. We've been approached by 3 major pediatric centers. They want to observe the program, learn from it, maybe replicate it. Grace looked down at her lap. Is it too soon? It's never too soon to share hope, Dr. Patel said, but we'll move at your pace. Meanwhile, Ethan and Lily continued to grow in tandem. During group sessions, Charlie and Luna would sometimes trade roles, nudging different toys, guiding different hands. On one especially crisp morning, the therapy team tried something new. Cross-interaction, Luna with Lily, Charlie with Ethan. The results were subtler, but still promising. The dogs adjusted quickly, sensing the needs of both children, regardless of history. But when Charlie returned to Lily's side, he curled against her legs like a puzzle piece slipping back into place. Lily giggled, a soft, open sound of recognition. Grace caught the moment on video. That night she uploaded it to a private support group for special needs parents. Within hours, the post had over 2,000 likes and dozens of comments. We needed to see this. How do I find a dog like that? I cried watching this. Thank you, Grace read every word. She sat at the edge of the bed while Lily slept beside Charlie and realized for the first time that this story wasn't just theirs anymore. It was becoming something larger, something that could stretch far beyond their little apartment, beyond the hospital walls, even beyond Philadelphia. It could reach parents like her, who once stared down an impossible diagnosis and felt completely alone. And maybe, just maybe, it could give them a place to begin. The morning started like any other. Gray light filtered through the blinds of the apartment. Soft hums from the heater filled the quiet. And Charlie stirred at the base of Lily's crib as if waking with her. Grace moved through her routine with practiced ease. Bottle warmed, Lily's medication sorted, therapy bag packed by the door. They had just finished breakfast when the call came. It was Dr. Patel. Her voice was calm, but Grace knew the tone too well. Measured, clinical, the sound of someone preparing to deliver something that might land hard. I'd like to meet with you and Ben later today in my office, she said. Nothing bad. Just important. Grace didn't like just important. She hung up slowly, then turned to look at Lily, who was curled in her swing by the window, eyes tracking Charlie as he played quietly with a piece of rope near her feet. Ben arrived shortly after noon, his work call cut short once Grace explained the message. Together they walked the now familiar path through the hospital's main corridor, Charlie trotting beside them with his usual quiet alertness. Dr. Patel's office was filled with light. She greeted them warmly, offering coffee and ushering them to the small round table in the corner. On the desk sat a laptop, already open to a paused video. Still, Lily and Charlie side by side, her tiny hand resting gently on his paw, a moment from 2 days ago. Dr. Patel folded her hands. I want to tell you about a proposal. Grace's stomach clenched. Ben reached across and lightly touched her knee. The Children's Hospital of Philadelphia is considering formalizing what you and Charlie have started here. We've had interest from medical boards, therapy institutions, even families across the country asking how they can participate. Grace blinked. Participate in what exactly? We're proposing a pilot program, an official model built on what we're calling the Charlie Protocol. A blend of animal-assisted therapy and peer-based interaction for pediatric patients with neurological impairment. Ben leaned forward. And Lily. She'd remain at the center of it, the core, not just as a patient, but as the catalyst. What she and Charlie are accomplishing, it's reshaping the way we look at neuroplasticity in children under 1 year. Grace sat back slowly. That's a lot for a 6-month-old. Dr. Patel nodded, which is why I'm not here to pressure you. I'm here to explain what it means and what it could offer. Ben rubbed his face. We're just getting used to all of this. The schedule, the attention, the science. Now you're saying, what? That this becomes our life? Dr. Patel was quiet for a moment. I'm saying it could be bigger than just your family. I'm saying it already is. Outside the window, snow had begun to fall, thin flurries tracing the glass in lazy spirals. Dr. Patel continued gently. There's no rush, no obligation. But there is interest. We'd like to begin documenting more of Lily and Charlie's interactions formally, beyond observation. More EEG tracking, physical milestones, maybe even beginning to prepare Charlie for therapeutic certification. Grace's heart ached a little at that. The word certification made Charlie sound like a tool, not the loving creature that had wrapped himself around their daughter's life like a heartbeat. We're not interested in turning him into a prop, she said softly. We wouldn't dream of it, Dr. Patel replied. But the truth is, his instincts are rare. If we can understand them better, we might be able to nurture those traits in other dogs. Imagine a future where more children like Lily Have a Charlie. Ben nodded slowly. It's a lot, but it makes sense. Grace looked at him, then back at the screen. In the frozen frame, Lily's eyes sparkled, her expression open and curious. Charlie, as always, seemed to know exactly where to be. We'll think about it, she said. Back in the apartment that night, Grace stood by the window, watching the snowfall deepen into something heavier. Inside, Lily was curled on her mat, blinking sleepily. Charlie lay close, chin resting lightly on her ankle. I feel like they're pulling her into something, she said aloud. Ben was at the table, sorting insurance papers. They're not pulling her, they're seeing her. Grace turned. You're okay with all this? I'm okay if she's okay, and she is. She's more alert than she's ever been. She's stronger. She sleeps better. She smiles. You said it yourself. She's blooming. Grace watched Charlie stretch beside Lily, then shift slightly as she let out a soft squeak of a laugh. She is, she admitted, but it scares me. I know, Ben said, but that doesn't mean we don't move forward. They were quiet after that. The snow fell. The heater kicked on. Charlie sighed in his sleep. The next morning, Charlie barked for the first time in days, a sharp, urgent sound that made Grace's blood run cold. She was in the kitchen. Ben was on the couch. Lily had been napping in her therapy chair. And Charlie was now standing upright, rigid, eyes fixed on Lily, barking again, deeper this time. Grace bolted across the room. Lily's face was turning red, her mouth wide open but silent. She's choking, Grace said, her voice like ice. Ben moved instantly, unbuckling the straps as Grace swept her fingers into Lily's mouth. Nothing. Ben tilted her. Grace's finger searched again, then found it. A piece of silicone from a broken pacifier had lodged deep in her throat. Grace pulled it free, and Lily gasped, loud and wild, the sound of a baby returning to life. They collapsed to the floor, Grace shaking, Ben holding Lily tightly. Charlie approached slowly and rested his head against Lily's leg, his body calm once more. Later, when Lily had settled and the emergency had passed, Grace sat in the bedroom with Charlie pressed against her leg. You saw it before we did, she whispered. Again. Ben stood in the doorway, pale. That's not therapy, he said. That's protection. Grace nodded slowly. He's not just a healer. He's her guardian. They didn't speak of it again that night, but both knew something had changed. The choice they'd been hesitant about was no longer theoretical. The hospital's offer wasn't a research proposal anymore. It was a calling. The first snowstorm of the season rolled into Philadelphia 2 days after the choking incident. Heavy flakes drifted down in thick sheets, blanketing the city in a hush that even the hospital couldn't break. Inside the pediatric therapy wing, everything was warm and bright, but Grace couldn't shake the chill that lingered in her bones. She'd been replaying those few seconds over and over, the way Charlie had barked, the sharp angle of Lily's face, the terrifying stillness before that desperate gasp for air. And then the aftershock, the clarity. Charlie wasn't just reacting anymore. He was anticipating, responding like he understood what was at stake. The hospital staff took notice. After reviewing the footage from the room's security cameras, yes, they'd caught the entire thing, Dr. Patel called an emergency research board meeting. This changes things, she told Grace and Ben the next morning. Not only is Charlie demonstrating therapeutic behavior, he's now showing predictive intervention. That's beyond any standard model we've studied. Ben nodded stiffly. Yeah, we know. Dr. Patel continued, her tone careful. We've been contacted by 2 national research centers. They want to send their neurologists to observe. With your permission, of course. Grace glanced at Charlie, who was resting quietly beside Lily's mat. Lily's hand was draped across his back as if she'd always known he was hers. You can bring the entire country in here, she said softly. Just don't turn him into a project. He's not a miracle. He's our family. That day, the team adjusted the therapy plan. The sessions would continue, but now with higher resolution EEG monitoring and motion capture video. Grace noticed the difference almost immediately. There were more people watching, more notes being taken. But Charlie didn't change. He still nudged Lily's toys with quiet precision, still circled her gently when she became fatigued, still lay beside her when she cried. On the fourth day of the updated protocol, Charlie did something new. The room was unusually quiet. Dr. Patel had stepped out for a conference call. Grace sat at the back wall watching as Lily half-heartedly reached for a soft red block. Charlie, after several attempts to engage her, paused. He stared at her for a few seconds, then walked over to the bag in the corner where Grace kept her personal items. Without hesitation, he stuck his head inside, rummaged for a moment, then pulled out Lily's favorite rattle, the one shaped like a small yellow duck. Grace blinked. How did he know where that was? Charlie trotted back, dropped the rattle just beside Lily's hand, and then sat down, waiting. Lily's eyes widened. She giggled, then reached. Her fingers curled around the duck with more control than Grace had ever seen. When Dr. Patel returned, Grace showed her the video she'd caught on her phone. The doctor's face changed instantly. He remembered. Not just what she likes, but where it was stored. That's memory-based assistance. The research team met that evening. The notes came in fast. Terms like emotional intelligence, associative memory, and nonverbal empathy response. But to Grace, it was simpler. Charlie understood Lily in a way that was beyond words. He wasn't just helping her move. He was reading her needs and adapting to them. Word began to spread. A small local news station reached out for an interview, which Grace politely declined. She didn't want cameras shoved in Lily's face. Not yet. But she agreed to a written feature for a parenting journal, something respectful and focused on the science. The article published 2 days later. Within 48 hours, the hospital was flooded with inquiries from families all over the country. That same week, something unexpected happened. Ethan's progress with Luna, while steady, hit a plateau. He grew frustrated during a session, refusing to speak or move. Luna, confused, sat beside him but couldn't coax him back into focus. Charlie, watching from across the room, seemed to sense something. For the first time, he left Lily's side during a session and walked over to Ethan. He dropped a toy in the boy's lap, a small stuffed fox that had once belonged to Lily, now frequently used in their group sessions. Ethan stared at it, then at Charlie, then at Luna. Slowly, he reached out and placed the toy in Luna's paws. Carla wiped her eyes. He shared. He hasn't shared a thing since the accident. Luna barked softly. Charlie licked Ethan's hand once, then returned to Lily. After that moment, the research team introduced a new element, co-therapy. Charlie and Luna would rotate gently between both children, sometimes working with them together, sometimes separately. The interactions grew more complex, more layered, and Lily, to everyone's amazement, began reaching for Charlie before he placed the toy, anticipating his cues. "She's predicting him," Dr. Harper said during one session, nearly dropping her clipboard. "She's cognitively mapping his patterns." By now, Charlie had become more than a therapy dog. He was a teacher. And then came the next offer, the biggest yet. Children's Hospital of Philadelphia wanted to extend the program, not by weeks, by a year. They wanted to study Charlie and Lily, Ethan and Luna, and build a national model. There would be funding, equipment, press coverage, but it would require the Whitmans to stay in Philadelphia full-time, relocate permanently, or at least indefinitely. Grace read the email 3 times. Then she closed the laptop and stared out the window, snow falling in lazy spirals beyond the glass. Her heart thudded quietly. That night she and Ben sat on the couch while Lily played quietly on the mat, and Charlie dozed beside her. "They want us to stay," she said. Ben didn't look surprised, but of course they do. "What do we do?" He took a long breath. "What we always do. We ask ourselves one question. What's best for Lily?" Grace leaned her head on his shoulder. "She's thriving here." "She is. But this place isn't home." "No," Ben said after a pause. "It's not. But maybe, just maybe, it's the start of something bigger." Charlie lifted his head then, as if to agree, and Lily giggled. The room fell quiet again. And outside the snow kept falling. The days that followed were heavy with decision. The email from the hospital had shifted the air in the apartment. It felt charged, unsettled, like everyone, Charlie included, was waiting for an answer. Grace tried to carry on with their routine, but her thoughts kept circling back to one thing. If they stayed, Lily might continue to thrive. But what would they be giving up? She sat at the kitchen table late one evening, the apartment dim and quiet. Lily had fallen asleep early, worn out from a particularly intense therapy session. Charlie rested at her feet, his breathing soft and steady. Ben was in the bedroom folding laundry, though she could hear him pacing more than folding. Rosa's voice echoed in Grace's mind from an old phone call. Home isn't always where you live. It's where things begin. And something had begun here. When Ben finally came out, he didn't sit down. He leaned on the counter, arms crossed. I can take a leave of absence, he said. Work said they'd hold my position, at least for a few months, but if we're talking a year or more... Grace looked up. We'd need help. We can't do this alone. He nodded. We have Rosa back home. But here, we'd be starting over. She reached down and scratched Charlie's head. Not entirely. We have him. The next day, Dr. Patel arranged a meeting with the hospital's program coordinator, a kind woman named Elise, who had a calm voice and a gift for making impossible things sound manageable. Elise laid out the logistics: a stipend, temporary housing near the expanded research facility, access to top-level therapists, and most importantly, continued control over how Lily and Charlie were involved. We don't want to exploit your family, she said. We want to learn from you. Grace asked one question. Would Charlie be allowed to stay with Lily at all times? Yes, Elise answered without hesitation. He's not part of the protocol. He is the protocol. Still, Grace hesitated. That evening, as snow dusted the sidewalks and the city lights shimmered in the icy air, she walked Lily in her stroller through the hospital courtyard. Charlie padded beside them, quiet and alert. She paused near the bench where she and Rosa had spoken on the phone days earlier. The cold bit at her cheeks, but Lily was bundled and content, humming softly. Charlie stopped. His ears perked, and he turned his head toward the far end of the courtyard. From the corridor, Ethan emerged in his wheelchair, Luna at his side and Carla just behind him. The boy's face lit up when he saw Charlie, then Lily. "Can we sit with you?" he asked. Grace smiled. "Of course." They all sat together in the quiet cold, 2 mothers, 2 children, 2 dogs. And for a moment the weight of the decision felt lighter, not because it had been made, but because they weren't carrying it alone. Later that night, Ben came home to find Grace on the floor of Lily's room, the baby asleep in her crib, Charlie curled beside it as always. "We can't leave Charlie out of this," she said. Ben knelt beside her. "We won't." She looked up at him. "Then let's stay, not forever, but for now. For as long as Lily needs this." Ben nodded once. "Home can wait." Charlie opened one eye as if he'd been listening the whole time and let out a quiet sigh. In the quiet stillness, the decision settled in. They would stay. Not because the hospital needed them, but because Lily did. Philadelphia didn't get easier. It just became familiar. With the decision to stay made, Grace felt the weight of uncertainty shift into a different kind of pressure, the quiet, constant push to make this count. If they were giving up home for now, it had to mean something. Therapy sessions intensified. Charlie and Luna were now part of a formal pilot, observed daily by a rotating team of therapists, neurologists, and behaviorists. Lily's progress was logged meticulously: improved tracking, faster response to stimuli, even increased vocalization. She'd started making more sounds, coos that occasionally shaped into soft babbles. And it wasn't just noise, it was purposeful. She spoke to Charlie in her own baby way, eyes locked on him as if they had their own language. Ethan, too, had changed. He no longer sulked through therapy. He greeted Luna each day with a smile and had started initiating activities instead of waiting for instruction. Carla mentioned over lunch one afternoon that he'd even begun asking to go outside, to the courtyard, to the cafeteria, to places he used to ignore. "They're bringing each other out of something," Grace said to Ben one night as they watched the two kids play side by side. "Like they know they're not doing this alone." Ben nodded. "It's not just Lily anymore, it's a team." That team became the foundation of a new idea, integrated co-therapy. Dr. Patel and Dr. Harper presented the concept at an internal hospital conference, a shared model where two children paired with two trained animals support and mirror each other's rehabilitation. The presentation included live video feeds of Lily and Ethan responding to the dogs and to each other. At the end of the session, the room rose in applause. Still, not every day was perfect. Lily had off days where her limbs felt heavy. Her attention drifted, her cries returned. Ethan had setbacks too, frustration, withdrawal, occasional emotional outbursts. But the difference now was resilience. They came back quicker, and they weren't afraid to try again. Grace saw it most in the little things. How Lily reached for Charlie even when her muscles failed her. How Ethan asked to help set up toys for Luna's exercises. They were beginning to understand effort in a way most adults never do. Then, one Thursday morning, everything shifted again. Lily was in the middle of a tactile exercise, small cloth blocks arranged by color. Charlie usually helped her identify them by scent association, placing his paw next to the correct one as Lily tried to mimic. But today, Lily didn't wait. As Charlie placed his paw on the green block, Lily reached before he could guide her. Her hand landed squarely on the block. Grace gasped softly. Dr. Patel looked up from her notes. Ben, filming quietly from the side, dropped the phone. "She beat him to it," he whispered. Lily giggled. Charlie wagged his tail once, clearly pleased. For the rest of the session, Lily was a step ahead. When Charlie retrieved a toy, she reached before he dropped it. When he nudged her elbow, she adjusted her posture without delay. It was as if her brain had bridged the delay, the lag between thought and motion, and now finally signals were firing in real time. Dr. Harper reviewed the EEG results that afternoon, her voice trembling slightly. "Her brain activity is syncing with his behavior patterns, not just responding, anticipating. That's a different level of recovery." They had expected Lily to follow Charlie. Now she was leading him. Word spread fast. Within the week, 3 national therapy organizations had reached out. Interviews were requested, journalists gently nudging for access. Grace and Ben declined most of them, preferring to let the work speak through the hospital's official channels. But one interview did make its way into the public eye, a segment on pediatric rehabilitation that featured a brief, softly narrated video of Lily and Charlie in action. No names, no faces, just movement. A baby's hand reaching, a dog's patient stillness. The video went viral in less than a day. Comments flooded in from around the world. Parents, therapists, even war veterans writing about their own experiences with therapy animals. This gave me hope. I watched this with my daughter and we both cried. How can we start a program like this in our city? Grace read the comments quietly one night, curled up on the couch with Lily asleep on her chest and Charlie pressed against her legs. She didn't feel like a pioneer or a story. She felt like a mom trying not to break, but she also felt proud. Not because the world was watching, but because Lily was changing and Charlie, steady, gentle Charlie, was helping her rewrite every expectation. That weekend, the hospital held a small celebration for the therapy team. Nothing extravagant, just pizza, music, and photos of the kids smiling on poster boards taped to the walls. Grace brought Lily in a soft blue onesie with stars on the sleeves. Charlie wore a simple vest with his name stitched over the heart. Ethan rolled in beside Luna, a paper crown on his head, and declared himself king of stretch time. Everyone laughed, including Lily. It was a sound Grace would carry with her forever. The therapy room felt unusually still that morning. The fluorescent lights overhead were dimmed to a soft glow, and the only sounds were the rhythmic hum of the EEG monitor and the faint tapping of snow against the windows. Lily sat in the center of her padded mat, dressed in a pale yellow onesie with tiny suns printed across the chest. Her eyes were wide, alert, and locked onto Charlie, who lay just a few feet away with his front paws stretched forward and his gaze fixed steadily on her. It was supposed to be a routine session. Nothing fancy, no new techniques, just a check-in with Dr. Patel, Dr. Harper, and two visiting researchers from Boston quietly observing from the corner. Grace, standing behind the one-way mirror, tried to steady her breathing. She told herself it was just another day. But in her bones, something felt different. Dr. Patel began the session with a series of verbal cues, encouraging Lily to focus, to reach, to engage. Charlie rose to his feet and nudged a blue ring toy forward, setting it gently near Lily's right hand. Lily blinked. Then, for the first time, she didn't just reach, she leaned. Her shoulder rotated, her tiny fingers stretched, not in the jerky, uncertain way they often did, but with control. Her torso followed. Her head tilted with determination. Then, slowly, so slowly it felt like the entire room forgot to breathe, Lily pushed off with her left elbow and rolled. Not stumbled, not tipped. She rolled. A full independent motion from her back to her stomach, and then propped herself on her forearms like a swimmer resting between strokes. The room erupted. Grace gasped and covered her mouth, tears springing to her eyes instantly. Ben, next to her, dropped his coffee and muttered, "Oh my God." Dr. Patel rose to her feet, stunned. The Boston researchers stood in shock, scribbling notes they'd never expected to write. And Charlie? Charlie didn't move. He just wagged his tail once, then stepped forward and placed the toy gently beneath Lily's chin, as if to say, "You did it. Now let's keep going." Lily giggled. That single sound cracked the tension in the room like glass. Grace rushed in seconds later, scooping Lily into her arms, sobbing into her hair. Charlie danced beside them, tail spinning, eyes shining. Ben arrived moments later, dropping to the floor next to them, kissing the top of Lily's head. "She did it," Grace whispered. "She actually did it." Dr. Harper stepped in quietly, checking Lily, wiping her own eyes as she nodded. "It was perfect form," she said. "Every muscle in sync, every neural pathway engaged. The moment was captured from 3 angles. The hospital uploaded a short, muted clip to its private research database. Somehow, even without sound, the video went viral within hours. A baby rolling over shouldn't have been extraordinary. But when that baby had been told she might never move again, and did it with the help of a dog who was never trained to help anyone, it became something else entirely. A miracle in motion. By that afternoon, Grace's inbox was full. Journalists, nonprofits, therapy groups, parents from across the globe. "How did you do this? Can you help us?" She didn't know what to say. That evening, the hospital hosted a small debrief for the core therapy team. They met in a quiet conference room, reviewing the footage, the data, the reactions. Dr. Patel looked around the table and said, "We've crossed into something new. What happened today wasn't just a milestone, it's a model." They began planning a presentation for national pediatric rehab centers. Dr. Harper volunteered to lead the medical side. Dr. Patel would explain the therapy framework. But they both agreed. Grace should be the one to speak about the experience. Grace hesitated. "I'm not a public speaker." "You're a mother who believed in her daughter," Dr. Patel said. "That's more powerful than any degree." When Grace got home that night, Lily was asleep on the playmat, Charlie curled around her protectively. Ben handed her a cup of tea and sat down beside her. "So," he said, "how does it feel to raise a little legend?" Grace gave him a tired smile. "Scary. Beautiful. All of it." She glanced at Charlie, now snoring softly. "I keep thinking, what if we'd said no? What if we never came here?" Ben reached for her hand. "Then we never would have seen this, and neither would anyone else." She nodded slowly. Tomorrow the world would keep watching. But tonight they had this quiet moment. Lily, breathing steadily, curled against the dog who helped her move for the first time. And for Grace, that was everything. The days following Lily's milestone blurred into a rhythm of gratitude, excitement, and quiet urgency. The hospital buzzed with new energy. Therapists walked taller. Nurses stopped by just to peek in during sessions. Even janitors paused to wave at Lily or scratch Charlie behind the ears. What had started as an experiment had become a movement. Grace tried to keep her footing in it all, tried to protect Lily from the rising tide of attention. But she couldn't ignore the shift. People weren't just observing anymore. They were learning, adapting, building. Dr. Patel scheduled meetings with program directors from other pediatric hospitals. Calls came in from as far as Oregon and Texas. Everyone wanted to know how to start their own version of the Charlie protocol. "We don't want to franchise this," Grace told her during one meeting. "This isn't a product." Dr. Patel had smiled. "It's not. It's a seed. And seeds grow." Still, Grace felt the pull of Asheville. The porch swing, Rosa's kitchen, familiar grocery aisles, and the way the town quieted after 8 p.m. Philadelphia had given them progress, miracles even. But it wasn't home. Ben felt it too. "We've given everything here," he said one night as he rocked Lily to sleep. "But she deserves to grow up surrounded by people, not paperwork." It was Rosa's call that gave the feeling shape. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice warm and certain. "What if we build something back here? Small, focused, a satellite version of what you've started. You bring the method. I bring the dogs." Grace hadn't responded right away. She sat on the edge of the bed, one hand resting on Charlie's back as he slept beside Lily. Could it work? Could something as big as this live in a small town? The next morning she brought the idea to Dr. Patel and Dr. Harper. To her surprise, they both lit up. "It's exactly what we were hoping for," Dr. Patel said. "Decentralization, real families, real settings. That's how we reach people." They laid out a proposal. The hospital would support the first official satellite program in Asheville, funding equipment, training local therapists, and sending Charlie-certified trainers for new dogs. Grace and Ben would run the pilot. "Are you saying we'd go home and lead it?" Ben asked. "Yes," Dr. Harper said. "You're not just the test case anymore. You're the blueprint." The decision came quickly after that, not because it was easy, but because it felt right. On their final day in Philadelphia, the therapy team gathered in the courtyard. A light snow fell as Dr. Patel handed Lily a small certificate, her first of many. "For bravery, patience, and teaching all of us," it read. Charlie received a matching ribbon on his collar. Ethan rolled forward in his chair, Luna beside him. "You'll come back, right?" he asked. Grace knelt beside him. "We'll visit. But more importantly, your story's just beginning too." Ethan grinned. "Luna says she's ready to be a boss dog now." The hospital arranged a modest farewell ceremony. Local news crews stood respectfully at the edge, filming from a distance. Grace gave a short speech, honest, tearful, steady. "We didn't come here looking for miracles. We came looking for a way forward. What we found was something better. Connection." The drive back to Asheville was quiet. Long stretches of road passed in comfortable silence. Charlie slept most of the way, his head in Lily's lap. She stroked his fur absent-mindedly, her movements stronger, more fluid now. Grace watched them in the rearview mirror and felt a calm she hadn't felt in months. When they arrived, Rosa was waiting on the porch with 2 golden retriever puppies tumbling at her feet. She waved as they pulled in, then came running down the steps, wrapping Grace in a hug. "Welcome home," she whispered. That night, as Lily slept in her own crib for the first time in 6 months, Grace and Ben sat on the porch swing, watching the stars blink back into their sky. Charlie lay curled at their feet, tail thumping softly. "Do you think we can really build this?" Grace asked. Ben reached for her hand. "We already have." Spring arrived quietly in Asheville, creeping in with warm breezes and pink buds on the dogwood trees. The grass on Rosa's property grew a little taller each week, and laughter returned to the corners of the Whitmans' home. Small moments, daily rhythms, the kind of ordinary joy Grace had once thought she'd never feel again. 3 months had passed since they returned. The new therapy center, nicknamed The Porch by Rosa, was nearing completion. It wasn't flashy, just a renovated barn at the edge of Rosa's land, with a wide ramp, soft floors, a wall of windows, and a sign hand-painted by a local artist that read, "Hope starts here." Grace spent her mornings working with a small group of families who had traveled from neighboring towns. Most came seeking answers for their children, some just looking for connection. All of them left with more than they arrived with. Charlie, now officially registered as a certified therapy companion, worked alongside Grace each day. His routines were second nature, greeting each child at the door, gently nudging toys into their reach, lying patiently as small hands reached for his ears or rested against his chest. His calm, intuitive presence had not changed. If anything, it had deepened. Lily had changed too. At nearly 18 months old, she was still behind her peers in mobility, but she had her own kind of strength, measured not in steps but in effort. She could sit upright now for long stretches, reach steadily with both arms, and had even begun crawling short distances across the mat, especially when Charlie waited for her at the other end. Her laugh came often, unprompted. Her sleep was deep. Grace watched it all with quiet pride. She no longer questioned the progress, or when it would come, or how it measured against anyone else's child. She simply celebrated every inch, every gesture, every giggle. One afternoon, as sun streamed through the open windows of the therapy barn, a small group gathered for their first official community session. Ethan and his mom had driven in from Philadelphia. Luna curled up at Ethan's feet. Rosa had baked too many cookies. Parents sat on folding chairs and talked softly while their children played nearby. Grace stood near the back wall with Ben, arms crossed, watching Lily scoot determinedly toward Charlie, who waited like he always did, patient, still, tail twitching with anticipation. When Lily reached him, she placed her hand on his paw, then looked up with a proud little smile. Ethan clapped. "She's faster than last time." "She's determined," Grace replied. "She always has been." Rosa stepped up beside them. "You know what I've realized?" she said. "This whole time people kept talking about how Charlie changed Lily, but maybe it was the other way around." Grace smiled. "Maybe it was both." That evening, after the families had gone home and the barn lights dimmed, Grace sat on the porch swing with Lily cradled in her lap. The sun dipped low behind the hills, and fireflies began to blink softly in the tall grass. Charlie lay on the porch floor, eyes closed, ears occasionally twitching in the breeze. Ben joined them, slipping an arm around Grace's shoulders. "Remember the first night we brought him home?" "How could I forget?" she said. "He was supposed to be temporary. And now—" Grace looked down at Lily, now fast asleep against her chest. "Now he's part of every reason we made it this far." Charlie stirred, lifting his head just enough to rest it against Grace's foot. "I don't think I believe in fate," she said after a long pause. "But I believe in him, and in her, and in what happens when the right souls find each other." Ben squeezed her hand. "That's more than enough to believe in." And for once, Grace didn't feel like she needed more answers. They had come full circle, not to an ending, but to something stronger, a new rhythm, a deeper purpose, a quiet kind of miracle born not from one moment, but from thousands of small ones stitched together by love, trust, and the quiet work of a golden dog who never once asked for anything in return, just to be near her. And he always was. I hope you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to my channel so you don't miss touching stories. Leave a like and then comment below what you thought of the emotional stories. See you in the next video.